So we're really excited to have for our next session a fireside chat with Andrew Ng about AI as the fourth industrial revolution, and with Judy Gichoya as moderator. Andrew is co-founder of Coursera and an adjunct professor of computer science at Stanford University. In 2011, he led the development of Stanford University's main MOOC, Massive Open Online Course platform, and he also taught an online machine learning class to over 100,000 students, thus helping launch the MOOC movement and also leading to the founding of Coursera. Andrew also works on machine learning with an emphasis on deep learning. He had founded and led the Google Brain project, which developed massive scale deep learning algorithms. And this resulted in the famous Google Cat result, which many of you may be familiar with, in which there's a massive neural network with 1 billion parameters learned from unlabeled YouTube videos to detect cats. And until recently, he led Baidu's 1,300-person AI group, which developed technologies in deep learning, speech, computer vision, NLP, and other areas. And our moderator for this chat today will be Judy Gichoya, who's an assistant professor in interventional radiology and informatics and imaging sciences at Emory University. She's an active member of the Winship Cancer Institute. So welcome, Dr. Ng and Dr. Gichoya.
Okay, thank you so much, Serena, and welcome again. This is the Fireside chat, and it's a little ironic because I grew up studying fires, and it's been it's kind of hard to imagine that we're doing this Fireside chat during the day. But welcome everyone where you're watching us from. Andrew, do you have some opening words for us?
No, just excited to be here. I was listening on some of their presentations right before this one about problems of heterogeneous data sources, chain on distribution doesn't work on the NICs. It's really exciting to see the tremendous momentum behind AI and healthcare, and that AIMI, Matt, Serena, other organizers are able to pull together an exciting symposium like this. So really glad to be here.
Awesome. I'm just going to go right to the question. So Nova is 1 year old and 5 months. Everyone is okay. It's been a tough, year this year. Is everyone in the family okay? I know you penned an article on Medium on the AI-powered world she will growing. Any thoughts of what's going on and being a dad before we get to the serious questions?
No, thanks, Judy. I think the pandemic is a tragedy, and one silver lining for me is that working from home means I get to see her every day for many hours. At the start of the pandemic, I was starting to work from home. She was starting to toddle around in a very unstable way, and now several months later, she's running around, and I miss the days when I didn't have to chase after her. So that's been a real blessing.
Awesome. Most of our attendees here will be curious. How did you get into healthcare AI?
Yeah, I want to. I actually have something with me that I want to show you.
Awesome.
So this is my single most treasured physical possession.
Computer applications in medical care.
The proceedings of a 1980s conference, and this why I got into AI and then later AI for healthcare is because of the work that my father was doing way back. This is 1980 on applying AI to medical diagnosis. This was work on diagnosis of liver diseases, very rudimentary models by today's standards. And he published a paper in these proceedings. But it was because my father was working on these things, he practicing doctor in Singapore, that he got me into AI when I was very young, and I wound up, having the good fortune of being able to make a few small contributions to AI. And then for all my career, I've wanted to do something in healthcare. And several years ago, had the good fortune to meet, people like Kurt Langlois, Matt Lundgren, Nikam Shah at Stanford that helped me and my group over in computer science get into healthcare, get into AI for healthcare. Just to wrap up the story. Several years ago, I was on holiday in Singapore, visiting my father's clinic, and he showed me these proceedings back then. This was a few years ago over a Christmas holiday. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. This is part of my own origins because my father working on this helped me get into AI and so on. And then like a year, sometime back, like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, to my surprise, this physical proceedings, it showed up in the mail here in the United States. And I thought, whoa, what just happened? Why did my father just send this thing to me? It was a real wake-up moment for me at the time. Called him up, turned out he was sick. He had pneumonia. And he was worried at that time for his own mortality, which is why he wanted to pass this to me so that, the next generation would have this. First thing I did was I digitized his paper and sent the PDF to my whole family. So we'll always have the PDF of my father's paper. And unfortunately, my father's fully recovered, a little bit decreased lung function, but in good health, fully recovered. But to this day, these paper proceedings remains my most treasured possession. I actually don't like taking out the holes, but because we're doing this via video, I feel glad that I could actually show it to everyone this way.
Awesome. That's amazing. I have to get my treasured possession now. And, you talked about your dad recovering from pneumonia. We know we're suffering through COVID pneumonia and the COVID pandemic. What are you doing on COVID-19 in terms of what's your group doing in terms of AI for COVID-19?
Yeah, I think COVID has so many implications. I think one, I feel like maybe I'm seeing two things. One is COVID-19 is accelerating the digital transformation of a whole society. So even outside healthcare, a lot of industries were undergoing digital transformation. But what was a nice to have going digital is now a must have for survival for a lot of industries. To take an example, outside healthcare, one of my friends runs a whole bunch of factories in Asia. And he called me up a couple months ago. He said, "Hey, Andrew, with COVID-19, I need my manufacturing staff to socially distance. I just cannot get as many people into a factory. Can you help me with technology so that people can still work safely, but with fewer people packed so closely together with computer vision systems and so on?" So, and this is a matter of, you just need to do this to keep the factories running. So I think AI, COVID has accelerated the digital transformation of society, and therefore also the AI transformation of a lot of industries. So I'm trying to help where I can there to take the amazing stuff we've come up, in the tech world and make sure it's spread to all of the other industries. And then second, I want to doing a funny thing. I feel like I'm just a computer scientist and a business leader. What do I know about healthcare? But when I looked at the situation several months ago, looking at the situation on infection control here in the United States, and things that, some of my friends like Christian Rose, Ken Jung, Ron Lee, people at Stanford were telling me, I felt that the United States was, I was very concerned about status infection control. But I actually thought, what do I know, right? I thought I should keep quiet, let people smarter than me and more knowledgeable than me take the lead. The conversation with Eric Topol that I think spoke this morning, and Eric on the phone call really influenced my thinking. Eric said, "Hey, Andrew, it's okay for you to make some noise and do your best to make a contribution here." And so I wound up getting together with Eric Topol, Christian Rose, Ken Jung, Ron Lee, and a few others to try to take best practices on infection control from around the world. Some countries that have managed the situation comparably well, like South Korea, Taiwan, try to synthesize the best practice. We wound up publishing something on infection control. I hear from some hospitals we're able to help a little bit. So I'm glad we're able to help just a little bit. But I think frankly, I look with admiration and the deepest respect at all of the doctors, many of them in this meeting on the front lines fighting this fight for all of society. And I think, we have your back, right? Whatever all of you healthcare workers on the front lines need, rest of us, me, all in to support you.
Awesome. So one of the things that has come up actually from the presentations earlier has been small data sets, compared to, relative comparison. And especially this has been very, very critical for COVID and people trying to apply techniques. Do you have any advice on dealing with small data sets? Where can people add value? And as a follow-up question is, especially when you hear the big names in company where they have big data sets, can we compete really, or what's our role, especially when we have small data sets? How do we approach that as a problem, and can we participate?
Yeah, I think a lot of modern AI had grown up in large consumer internet companies that have hundreds of millions or billions of users and does giant data sets. And so a lot of the technologies for building AI systems where really the path was led by companies with like 1 billion users, can train on 1 billion data points and get deep insights into how to build a speech recognition system, how to market when you have a very large set of users. But once you look outside software consumer internet, no industry, not healthcare, not agriculture, not manufacturing, not retail, pretty much no one has these giant data sets. And I find that the techniques developed for training on big data often don't work on small data. So I think in order for machine learning to be successfully deployed in many healthcare settings and other settings outside software consumer internet, I think we need better small data techniques. And this includes everything from, transfer learning, one-shot learning, few-shot learning, data generation, and then just new ideas, new ways of thinking. Actually, here's one concrete example. If you have 1 million users, if you have some noisy data, it's fine. Train your neural network, it kind of averages out. If you have 100 training examples, guess what? One mislabeled example in your training set actually has a big impact. And so my teams, we do things like if the algorithm isn't doing well enough, we look at the test set, and if we think the test set is mislabeled, we change the test set. I know this sounds suspicious. Change the test set so we do better. But that's what you need to do. Or if one training example is mislabeled, guess what? We try to figure out change the training set label. And I think being more systematic and disciplined in how we go about that, I think is important. And I wouldn't buy the hype that you need giant data sets and lots of compute to make any progress in AI. It is one way to make progress in AI. I was really excited about the announcement of GPT-3 just a few weeks ago. Incredible progress by continuing to drive scale. But I think there's plenty of work to be done with small data and more modest compute resources as well.
Awesome. That's a great suggestion. I may steal some of your words for my presentation coming up on data autopsy. And so, one of the things I love to study is how machine learning works in real life. And I hope there are some of our attendees outside there that love to do this, but man, deployment is very, very, very difficult. I'm thinking about, explainable AI, human-computer interactions. We know that before the pandemic, all doctors hated the electronic medical record system, because of how many clicks we have to do. And the issue about building trust, And so what are some of the lessons you've learned from deploying AI systems in the real world?
Yeah, so I think the whole field of AI in healthcare, but outside healthcare as well, has a problem, or we need to get better at bridging the proof of concept to production deployment gap. So I think there's a proof of concept to production gap in many application verticals. And the proof of concept is when, you train and test on the same source of data, or a previous speaker alluded to some of the limitations of this, and you get a great test set accuracy and even publish a paper, which can be rigorously peer reviewed and accepted. So that's the successful proof of concept. But in the real world, I think some of the problems I see, right, which you've already talked about. We're very good at getting AI for radiology to diagnose common conditions for which we have a lot of data, but the rare conditions that a human radiologist can diagnose, but you have only 10 pictures, we're not very good at handling those. Our algorithms need to be more robust and generalized better. When the data changes, train on high quality Stanford hospital data, walk the model to a different hospital, the data is just different, right? Maybe a different protocol for the imaging, a different machine, make the systems more robust and generalizable. And then also change management. When Anand Avanti was working with Professor Nigam Shah, with rolling out our system for palliative care prediction at Stanford Hospital, working with Dr. Stephanie Harmon, head of the palliative care, what happens? Well, initially, when Dr. Stephanie Harmon looks at the system of the AI and says, oh, these patients are at high risk of mortality, let me call the attending physician. And well, what happens? You call the doctor, and the doctor says, who are you? And why are you telling me my patient's about to die? And I think what's needed is really a change management process where we identify the stakeholders, figure out who are the doctors affected, who are the nurses affected, does it implicate on insurance, who needs to figure out the advanced care directive implications, have those conversations, and then maybe rethink some of the system. Do we need more explainability? What allows us to then bring everyone with us? AI is very disruptive. We can take a piece of a workflow and automate it. But when we take one piece of someone's workflow, such as figuring out who's at high risk of mortality, or maybe screening for diagnosis of radiology or whatever, when you take one small task and automate that, that small automation propagates to change a lot of other people's work, right? The radiologist now works differently, insurance works differently, nurses work differently, the operations work differently. And so to figure out who are the people affected, the stakeholders, have conversations with them, and then map out what's the set of changes we need to take everyone with us. I think this is something that we as a community, the AI community, healthcare community, all of us working together, something I hope all of us can get better at.
Awesome. So I don't know about our attendees here, but it's been a little difficult to keep physically distant, staying in one place. And it's interesting how you miss something when you lose it a little bit, And I know you have mental health is now at the core in the era of physical distancing. You have a startup, WeBot Health, where you're applying AI for mental health. Tell us a little bit about this, because we know it's been really, really tough to be physically distant, but doesn't mean that we have to be socially distant, because we are connected. But I'm curious to hear sort of what work you're doing in mental health.
Yeah, I know. I think even prior to COVID, I feel like there's been a silent mental health care crisis here in the United States, even prior to COVID. I think we as a nation spend $130 billion a year on heart disease. We spend about, I think, if I remember, $200 billion a year on mental health. There was a problem. There was a crisis of mental health even before COVID, and with COVID, the self-reported anxiety and depression in the country and around the world has only skyrocketed. So several years ago, one of my friends, Alison Darcy, had the visionary idea of building a chatbot to support digital mental health. And today, Alison Darcy and Michael Evers, CEO of WeBot, are doing incredible work building an app to support individuals in mental health. One thing I worry about is many individuals in the COVID era are experiencing increased loneliness. And I don't want to say that's okay, but it is okay. I mean, it is normal when society is going through these challenging circumstances to feel lonely or feel worried. I worry a lot about children, especially teenagers, school-age children, with the turmoils and the changes in the K-12 system, as well as the higher ed system. Like a 15-year-old teenager, they can't see their friends for some strange reason, and they know something's wrong with the world. So that's another big thing. But I hope that tools like WeBot will be useful. And I think the world has not had enough therapists for a long time now. Even wonderful, I think Stanford University has wonderful mental health services. And even it was sometimes a long waiting list for students to get in to see someone. But I hope that tools like WeBot, which cannot replace mental health practitioners, but I think can support people in a different way, can be a very scalable way to assist many people with mental health. So some of my friends have told me that they felt much better as a result of using WeBot, and I find Michael Evers and Alison Darcy and team's ability to help. I find that very gratifying.
Awesome. So, it's great that you said it cannot replace the specialist. In 2017, you posted a tweet from a radiology resident, we're going to say Dr. Nameless, who said, and, you said, posting with permission, you said, Dr. Andrew, I'm 3 years into specialist radiology training. I was actually a radiology resident then. Should I quit and do something else? How close are radiologists to being replaced? What would be your message to them today, 3 years later?
Yeah. But Matt Lundgren and I chat a lot about this, and by shout out to Matt, wonderful collaborator, taught me and my team so much about radiology over the years. My advice if you ever get a chance to work with Matt or Kurt Langblatt, do it. Yes, totally. But I think that radiology will undergo a transformation, and uh, I think that one very fine thing to do is to participate in radiology. When you're in industry that's about to be disrupted, which I think it will be over years, um, it's not a bad thing to actively participate in the transformation of the industry to then work together to lead it to a better place where maybe radiologists, for which the world doesn't have enough radiologists today. So if AI tools can help radiologists, do more reads or be more efficient at work, there's plenty of untapped demand. Now, the tricky thing about pursuing a career in a radiologist is the question of, will there ever be a point where the cost of the radiology work, right, drops so much that it then that there's an oversupply? I think we're nowhere near that point today, and there's a lot of exciting work to be done still by radiologists and AI people working together to figure out and deploy the tools. If I'm being perfectly honest, when my daughter grows up, if she listens to me, which I have no idea if she will, and it's her decision, not mine. I don't know that I would advise her to go into radiology if I'm being perfectly honest.
Interventional radiology. Dr. Langren has not been doing a good job.
I see.
Interventional radiology.
Okay.
But, sorry.
Yeah, but I think the field is just undergoing tremendous disruption, and we do need radiologists and AI people working together to then help get us all to a brighter future.
Well, don't despair, people. I'm still here. I did not despair 2017, but serious stuff now. Is AI? What do you see? AI is AI the fourth industrial revolution?
I think AI is very transformative. The world's gone through a few industrial revolutions, right? That's transformed society. I think I think AI is just as electricity transformed every industry started about 100 years ago. I think AI will now do the same. If you look what AI has done, I think the AI community has already transformed the software internet industry with more work to be done. But all of the leading software internet companies have good AI capabilities. The next piece of work for all of us to do together is to use AI to similarly create that much value, which I think will be more than we've created so far in the internet industry, so that the entire economy and all of the people that work in all of these different sectors of the economy, from healthcare to agriculture to retail to manufacturing to transportation, on and on and on, can now enjoy the gains that we can help realize with AI.
And so just starting to wrap up here, but we know that famous researchers have quit computer vision due to harms of computer vision and the society impact of their work, for example, in facial recognition. Very, very sensitive topic right now as we undergo actually two pandemics, COVID and racial, maybe more activity. I'm not saying that racial injustices have never happened, they have, but more towards the public eye. I'm curious, what's your opinion on the work that needs to be done and not done, regarding the impact of AI? One is displacement of jobs, but I'm curious to hear your opinion on this.
So AI will create tremendous value, already has, will continue to do so. I think that's just a given. We have a lot of work to do to make sure that takes place. Some things I worry about, there are AI systems that we do need to make sure that AI systems are built and rolled out in responsible and accountable ways that benefit all people. And I wouldn't do this work, right, if I didn't think that fundamentally we can help a lot of people. And I think we need more active people engaged and working to push the field in the right direction. I think one of the challenges of AI is it's so disruptive. But I remember when the machine learning community was a small community, all of us, I think literally all of us almost knew each other. And I would take the ICML machine learning conference proceedings home, and I will read at least every single paper's abstract. Maybe not read every single paper, but I basically look at every single paper published in my field. Now, just no one can do that anymore today. But when we were just a small group of technology enthusiasts building what we thought was promising technology, I certainly didn't realize, I don't think any of us did, the breadth of impact that machine learning would have. And who would have thought that someone trying to implement software to enable freedom of speech on the internet will lead to the unintended consequence of toxicity on social media. So I think there are a lot of unintended consequences that AI can create, but it will take all of us working as a community with people stepping in and engaging to try to shepherd this to a good outcome so that AI systems do perform the way we hope they do, make sure that any bias is quickly identified and minimized or squashed entirely, make sure that we disincentivize the adverse users of AI or the harmful users of AI, such as AI to generate fake comments or AI and to create the value. And also one thing is important, AI technology is accelerating concentration of power. The internet allows many, I don't know, say hospitals to centralize data at headquarters. AI allows you to process that data and push data back out to all of the periphery. And so the internet and AI are accelerating concentration of power. And so we'll create tremendous value, tremendous wealth. But I think another thing that all of us need to be engaged in is to make sure to democratize access to AI, provide education, provide tools, and just find ways to make sure that all this wealth we create will be fairly shared.
And so to pretty much, because you're at the top of the hour and we need to move on, but specifically, personally, and I know we have quite a diverse audience listening. It's been a little difficult the last couple of months, navigating, my world as a physician and someone who works in technology, and especially as a Black female, and I was really honestly surprised, Andrew, by talking to one of your mentees, really one of your students, who said, "Oh yeah, I have a chat with Andrew coming up," and I was like, man, he is an educator. You're putting all these videos online. You're teaching. You're a dad. You're starting all these many startups. And I was like, wow, this is amazing that it felt that this was something that the students could get advice to. And if I would ask, how do you make 48 hours out of your 24 hours to do all these things? And what advice do you have to, especially people who are feeling it just a little more out there, who are navigating STEM, and it's just been a little more stressful than usual? And that's really my final question.
No, yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's probably Sharon and Joe that you're talking to, right? Wonderful. I really enjoy working with her. I think, I know the whole world is going through tough times. So if any of you listening to this, feeling down, feeling lonely, feeling other sorts, you're not alone, and you have allies. We're a community, the healthcare community, the AI community, the AIMI community. We're a community, and I think we should. I don't want to say that it's okay if anyone's feeling like that, but at some level, it is okay, and we'll get through it together. In fact, hey Judy, I don't know if I'm allowed to do this. I'd love to ask you. I think I heard about your story of when you were practicing medicine, pandemic, dealing with Excel. I mean, that was an adverse situation. But can I get you allowed to do this? But can I get you to tell that story? I found that inspiring.
Oh. Which story? Maybe I cannot hear you well, but anyway.
Okay, but I found that when you're in Kenya, right, before coming to the United States, dealing with the HIV pandemic, frankly, struggling to use spreadsheet systems, right, to figure out. I thought that was inspiring that in that tough situation, you were able to pull technology, and then, you should tell that story, not me.
Yeah. So, wow. So, I mean, the story is really my how I matched my passion to IT and medicine. And really this came from my medical training. I'm an immigrant, and in my final years, I was very excited to go to the clinical wards, and and I was really. It happened to be the time that Kenya was going through a HIV pandemic, and it's a little bit of a I wouldn't have thought I would be a physician again going through another pandemic. And, initially when we started to take care of the HIV patients, we tracked what we were giving them in terms of their medication and on Excel spreadsheets. And these Excel spreadsheets, had a maximum number of rows. If you had those computers then we moved to an Access database that still had a maximum number of rows. And all of a sudden, physicians who do informatics, they are my friends, came together and worked on developing an open source medical record system, actually called OpenMRS, that's now used in 42 countries around the world. And this is how my journey got into computing. But what I learned most is about this idea of communities, and that local communities can work together to solve problems that are inherent to them if you empower them. And you have to approach them by learning and, in the spirit of Ubuntu, which means I am because you are.
That's really cool. And can I just say, I feel like, you in Kenya struggling with HIV pandemic, figuring out spreadsheets, couldn't have enough rows in the Excel at the time, found a way to innovate on technology and use that to help many people. And I hope that maybe some listener going through a tough time will take inspiration from that. I'm not saying that, if Judy could do it, anyone can. I think what you did was really hard, but I hope that others can take inspiration and take the current struggles. I feel like I just write software, right? I think as a doctors and the healthcare practitioners on the front line solving these problems that are the heroes. And so I think, engineers like me, we're eager to find ways to support, people exactly like Judy and all of you working so closely with the patients and the doctors to make all this better for everyone. So thanks very much for humoring me, Judy.
Thank you. If you're watching, goodbye.